Saul Rosser. I'm the operations director at Aquarius Reef Base, which is NOAA's underwater habitat, a research station about 4 miles off of Key Largo. We house 6 people at a time, about 60 feet underwater, and here today we're at the shore facility where we have our boats, our research vessels, as well as our decompression chambers, our watch desk, our control room, and compressors, other support equipment. And so today we're going to give a tour of that, give an overview of what's happening. During this mission, we run about 8 missions a year. This mission is a NASA mission, as you guys know, and during this mission we have 3 astronauts, a planetary scientist, and 2 of our technicians looking underwater. We also had a couple of submersibles which were working with the NASA crew to work on techniques for exploring asteroids. So they were down there looking at how do you translate across an asteroid, and how do you work out the details of moving along in a zero-G environment, taking samples and working across the surface of the asteroid. So we set up a lot of mock facilities. There's a climbing wall down there meant to be the asteroid surface. There's a lot of other structures down there meant to mimic the asteroid. And in a big sense, the NEEMO projects are intended to simulate what it is to do a mission. And so you have the specifics of the mission, i.e. going to the asteroid and doing those techniques required for exploration. But in a much bigger sense, you have the whole dynamic of running a mission, an entire mission. So this is the commitment of living in a foreign and semi-hostile environment underwater where you have life support requirements. The commitment of having 17 hours of decompression before you can surface, as well as the whole experience of having a topside crew. I think there's 30 or 40 NASA people here, and that topside crew is also, let's say, training and learning how to work a mission project. So you have a Capcom working as a communications lead, you have planning people, you have all sorts of people running the entire project, the entire mission. And that gives NASA really an opportunity in a much less expensive way to train people up and to work out the kinks on how to run an operation, a relatively complex operation. I think during the peak we had something like 80 people on site and offshore. We had a lot of support from not only the Aquarius team and the NEEMO team, but also United Space Alliance. They brought the motor vessel Liberty Star down and supported submersibles, and that was really, really helpful, very professional crew there. So it's a really big operation, a lot of people coming together, and today we are at the next to last day of the mission and getting ready for decompression. So at 4 o'clock this afternoon we'll start decompression in the habitat. The aquanauts are now inside, they finished their last dive, and they are equilibrating at what we call storage depth. So any excess nitrogen in their body from being at depth is now coming out. They're getting into a stable state at 47 feet of seawater, and at 4 o'clock today they'll start decompression. So that's the basic overview. Questions? Okay. Sir?
What are some of the biggest risks involved in this kind of project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what we do here, there are a lot of risks. They're extremely well mitigated, so the risk is actually low. I should say again, there are a lot of hazards. Those hazards are extremely well mitigated, and so therefore the risk is low. The hazards, the fundamental issue is that you're underwater, you're in a hostile environment in the sense that you can't live there without support, without engineering intervention. And so there's basic issues about making sure you have something to breathe. And so when you're out on excursions in your helmets, making sure you have air supplies, redundant air supplies. But then in the habitat itself, the habitat is incredibly safe. Saturation diving is an incredibly well understood technique, incredibly safe technique. But the biggest issue in theory is a flood or a fire in the habitat. That's very low probability, but possible, and therefore we have a lot of mitigations to deal with that, including what you see behind me, which is an evacuation chamber. If it came to it, we'd bring the aquanauts into this chamber, bring them back to our shore facility, our shore chamber, and decompress them there. So there are some risks, but they're extremely well mitigated, and this is, in my opinion, the safest form of diving around.
When you call them risks, you call them hazards, but it's pretty realistic, I would imagine, to what it's like in outer space, and is that the benefit of this?
Absolutely. There's a lot of parallels. So in outer space, you have a contained environment, i.e. the space station or a shuttle or another space vehicle. You have a contained environment where people live, and then you have procedures for checking out or staging out, going on EVAs from that environment. And when you're out, you have a life support system that comes with you and you wear. It's the exact same thing here. When we have a procedure for staging out of the habitat, when you're out, you wear life support equipment. You have dive helmets on. You have stuff that you're dependent on for life support. And so there's that very much that attitude of being inside the cocoon of the habitat and then going on your EVA and doing your activity to return to that safe and protected environment.
You're with Aquarius?
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding Aquarius's funding is greatly endangered by the current administration. How important is it to keep something like Aquarius available to organizations like NASA for this type of training?
Yeah, and Aquarius, there are some there's discussion about the funding of Aquarius. We've gotten a lot of support, and so I'm optimistic about the future. But that being said, you're absolutely right. Aquarius provides a lot of value to a number of organizations. For NASA, there's value in terms of training. It's not just being in a neutral buoyant environment, but it's that whole mission experience. Being able to go and run an entire mission with the topside crew and in-water crew, and get that whole commitment feeling that you are in this hostile alien environment, and that's something that's hard to replicate anywhere except in space itself.
Is there anywhere else in the world that astronauts can do this type of stuff?
There is not. The first habitat was built in 1962 by Jacques Cousteau. Now 50 years later, this is the last habitat on the sea floor, and this is the only place you can do this kind of thing. So if Aquarius did go away, that would be it. There's also a very strong part of what we do at Aquarius related to marine research and marine science, and that is really important because over the last decades there's been really substantial changes to the reef environment, and Aquarius has been at the forefront of monitoring, understanding, and attempting to mitigate those changes. And so what we do here is critical to the health of the reefs in South Florida and around the world. Sir?
So what kind of shape is this habitat in? You know, it's first installed down in St. Croix. I was there for quite a while. It's been here for how many years?
That's right. So the habitat was built in the 1980s. It was first deployed in 1988 in St. Croix. It was then moved to Key Largo in 1992. It's been down and underwater for about 20 years. And to be honest, it's in really good shape. It's down there and it's become somewhat of a living reef, so the outside is covered with a lot of marine life, but fundamentally it is sound. We do regular inspections, and the status of the steel is good, and the life of Aquarius is indefinite as far as I can tell. As far as the engineering says, there is no life expectancy on Aquarius.
Have the systems in it been updated to the point where they're modern? Or
that's right.
So
1980s, 92. There are two types of systems in my view in Aquarius. There are the mechanical systems, which in many ways are still like they were in the 1980s. Fundamentally, a valve is a valve. We made some improvements, but fundamentally it's the same thing. Where there's been massive progress over the last years is with electronics and communications, as we all know, and Aquarius is really at the leading edge of that. We have the ability to go and interact with divers in the habitat from anywhere in the world. Earlier this mission, we did a link up between the habitat and the International Space Station. That was simple. What's hard for us is doing the interactions between the habitat and aquanauts and museums and other institutions around the world, schools around the world. Those are more challenging, but well within the capability of Aquarius. We have modern electronic infrastructure and broadcast capabilities, and that's really the forefront of where Aquarius is and where it's going, is bringing that excitement and that real thrill of the mission and living underwater to the world. And frankly, NASA really does a good job of bringing that excitement.
How busy is it here in terms of missions, projects?
Sure. So Aquarius runs for approximately 8 missions a year. We run a NASA mission, a Navy training mission, and 6 science missions. So we have a pretty busy schedule. We stand by for VHF. Yeah, no problem. So Aquarius runs 8 missions a year, a NASA mission, a Navy training mission, and 6 science missions. That keeps us very busy. During the winter, we have a maintenance period for about 3 to 4 months, but then we get into a mission season that cycles just very rapidly from mission to mission to mission. And so really right now, is there some capacity? Yes, with additional funding there could be more missions, but right now we're really pushed up against the wall and pushing real hard.
When you talk about the age of Aquarius, I was talking to a structural specialist who said it's kind of like an airplane,
okay,
that the steel fluxes and it gets stronger. I mean, is that accurate?
So in a sense, it's like an airplane in that there's cycles that it's exposed to, and so there's an issue of fatigue life. But realistically, we cycle once a month, and an airplane cycles many, many times a day. So the number of cycles Aquarius can have is massive, and the number we've conducted is extremely small, and as such, there's really no lifespan issue related to fatigue cycling of the habitat.